Well, welcome back to the show, everybody. I am sitting here on a very lovely Saturday morning with Mr. Frank King, and he has given us the really incredible honor of joining us here today, and I'm really excited. Also, because you're just a really fun guy, and I like your personality already after 2 minutes of conversation. So, this is going to be a good one. And the topic we're going to talk about today and where that leads is equally as important. So welcome to the show, Mr. King.
My pleasure to be here. Although you and I both know I'm not here voluntarily. It's actually part of a plea bargain arrangement that I...
Yeah, absolutely. You must show up, do your duty. Yeah. I get it.
Or jail.
I get it.
And I thought, well, okay.
Yeah, I'll sacrifice some morning. Very good.
Yeah.
Well, my first question I always like to lead off with is, for the person who's listening today, what's the most important message that you really want them to hear and to walk away with?
That anyone can stop suicide. You do not have to be a clinician. You can make a difference. You can save a life. And you can do it by doing something as simple as what we're doing right here, and that is starting a conversation if you know how, and I'm happy to teach you how.
Awesome. Yeah, this is such a important topic, and as I just saw a bunch of statistics roll out from 2025 and the data on suicides, and especially suicide for first responders. This is a very relevant topic, and I like to continue the conversation because I think for a long time it was like, don't talk about it. People don't want to hear about it. People don't know how to talk about it. And
Sure.
so part of my mission is no, we need to actually talk about it.
Yeah, my first
So,
TEDx talk was called Start the Conversation, because what I discovered was when I was preparing for that talk, even though at the time one person died by suicide every 11 minutes in the U.S., hardly anybody talked about it unless you brought it up. And then almost everybody has a story.
yeah. So with that, tell us a little bit about your story and how you got to this place of where you are today, plea bargain or not.
I got the ankle bracelet. Actually, it's in my DNA, as is comedy. Depression and suicide run in my family. It's called generational depression and suicide. My grandmother died by suicide. My mother found her. My great aunt died by suicide. My mother and I found her. I was 4 years old. I screamed for days. I'll spare you the story. It's in my first TEDx talk called A Matter of Laugh or Death. A Matter of Laugh or Death. And I myself in 2010, in the last recession, after declaring bankruptcy and losing everything, I learned what the barrel of my gun tasted like, literally. Spoiler alert, I did not pull the trigger. And it's okay to laugh. That was the point. A friend of mine came up after a keynote recently, and he'd never heard me say out loud I didn't pull the trigger. So he said, he thought he'd be funny. Hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger? I go, hey, man, did you try to sound slightly less disappointed? That's where the humor is in the topic, not jokes, but funny personal anecdotes. So I'm a two-time suicide loss survivor. A one-time suicide, thank goodness, didn't go through. And I have two mental illnesses. One's called major depressive disorder, relatively common, and another that's relatively rare called chronic suicidal ideation, which means for me and my tribe, the option of suicide is always on the menu as a solution for problems large and small. And I tell the audience, look, when I say small, a couple of years ago, my car broke down. I had three thoughts. One, get it fixed. Two, buy a new one. Or three, hell, I could just kill myself. That's chronic suicidal ideation. Well, actually, the benefit of telling that story each time I keynote, there's almost always someone in the audience who has that condition. And almost invariably, they have no idea it has a name. They think they're just some kind of freak and completely alone. I was at a dental convention, and as everybody's leaving the conference room I was in, there's a dentist, a woman walking toward me, and I can see that she's crying. And when she gets to me, she's crying so hard she can't speak. And I said, you have chronic suicidal ideation. And she nodded, yes. I said, you didn't know it had a name. Nod, yes. You thought you were just some kind of freak. Nod, yes. I said, well, listen, do you have a therapist back home? Yes. She nodded. Well, tell your therapist everything you told, everything you learned today. And for goodness sakes, tell her you learned it on Google. Don't tell you learned it from a comedian. And a week later, I got an email that said, Frank, I think I was at that dental convention in large part just to meet you. You have changed my life, and I can't say that about a lot of people. So that's the power of starting that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you just find that commonality with people because I 100% agree with you. I think this is so much more common than people
Yeah.
know or keep people want to talk about. And what you did there is like normalize the experience and say, like, I'm there too. And when we know other people are there with us, it's so much easier to navigate those difficult things.
Yes. And when I finish my keynote, I tell the audience, look, we're going to do some general Q&A. And then when we're done with that, if you have a story you want to tell or a question you want to ask, and you don't want to ask in front of everybody, I'll hang out an extra 30, 45 minutes, take them individually. And there's always a line, sometimes two people, sometimes 10. Because my job is to go on stage, be vulnerable, start the conversation, and give them permission to give voice to their feelings and experiences surrounding these things without recrimination. Most of those conversations start, I've never told anybody this. Yes, I get that a lot. It is on occasion extremely dramatic. I was in Cincinnati. I was speaking on site to construction workers. Construction has the highest rate of suicide of any industry in the U.S. 1,000 people last year died by accident in construction. 5,000 died by suicide. You're 5 times more likely to jump off the building than fall off. So the last guy in line, a nice young African-American gentleman, I'm guessing about mid-20s, a carpenter. He's crying so hard he can't speak. So I waited. And when he gathered himself, I said, what's up? He said, well, I haven't slept in 2 nights. I work on the 5th floor of this building. I think about jumping off every day. I said, why is that? He said, because I've lost 3 people in my life in the last year to violence, including my daughter who died in my arms. How'd you like somebody to pull the pin on that emotional grenade and drop it in your lap? So the HR guy who hired me, HR human resources guy, wasn't far away, so I waved him over. I said, look, you need to get the EAP, Employee Assistance Program binder, find the closest mental health facility, and take this gentleman by the hand and get him there for evaluation immediately because he is circling the drain. A couple of months later, I had occasion to talk to the HR guy, and I'm terrified to ask. Finally got up my nerve. Whatever happened to that nice carpenter, Frank? He was evaluated. He was medicated. He's back on the job.
Wow,
Anyway.
that's so cool. Ugh. Well, tell me a little bit about like speaking of being a survivor of 2 losses. And I think that's one area we don't always get to talk about or understand the impact of, but how I know in one of those you were pretty little when it happened anyways. But how have you gone about processing that and how have you if you've come to that place of peace and acceptance with it, like what does this look like on the other side for the survivors?
Well, mine was a bit of a unique. Hang on, there's a cat walks up in my lap. Bit of a unique situation in that I was 4 years old. And by the way, trigger warning: what you're about to hear may raise strong emotions. It's gruesome. I'm 4 years old. My mom found her grandmother, or my grandmother, and 9 years later, she couldn't reach my great aunt, my grandmother's sister. So, given the family history, given her, her experience with her grandmother, she got panicked. So she bundled me into the car at 4 years old. We drove over to my great aunt's apartment, and we let ourselves in. And there was nothing out of place we could see until we got to the kitchen. And in the kitchen, everything that should have been in the refrigerator, an old lock type refrigerator, not a magnetic strip, but a latch,
Hmm.
yeah, was on the counter, the milk and the butter and the egg and the cheese. And so what had happened was my great aunt had crawled inside that refrigerator to end her life, pull the door to behind her. Because once you're in one of those, you can't get out from the inside. And then at some point, it turns out, changed her mind and tried to claw her way out. So my mother, not realizing any of this, I'm holding onto her skirt tail, walks over to the refrigerator, swings the door open. My great aunt falls out and pins me to the floor. So we're face to face with her face frozen at last moment of horror. And as I mentioned, I screamed for days. Well,
Hmm.
my mother tried to make a deal with God. She said, look, if he can forget that, I'll give you 10 years of my life. And my mom died at 62, which is about 10 years sooner than most women her generation passed away. So who's to say? But turns out I walled it off in my brain somewhere. I had no memory of it for the longest time until my cousin, who was 10 years older, I was at his restaurant in Raleigh. We were chatting, and I told him the myth I had been told that if I ever ask about my great aunt and the refrigerator, whoever it was in the family was supposed to say, "Oh, yes, she was sitting inside the refrigerator with her hands folded in prayer looking serene." I told that to my cousin, who's 10 years older, who knew all about it. And he goes, "Serene my ass. The old bat fell out and pinned you to the floor." And it all came rushing back.
Oh.
Yeah. Bad in that I would probably better off not remembering it, but good in that I, it helped to propel my from being a funny speaker, a comedian, to a speaker who's funny. Because I always wanted to make a living and a difference. I just could never figure out how. And given my grandmother, my great aunt, my close call, my two mental illnesses, more nuts in my entire family than in a squirrel turd, I thought I can keynote on suicide prevention if I got some training, which I did. And then I thought, well, who's going to take me seriously? So I thought I'll do a TEDx. So I did my first TEDx, and then two more TEDx events called, said, "Do you have any more mental health topics?" "Oh, yeah." And I just did my 13th and booked my 14th. So they're all on mental health, one aspect or another. So anyway, that's kind of, and I mean, I began my career as a comedian in fourth grade. I told a joke at 9 years old. The kids laughed. The teacher was hysterical. She had to excuse herself to go to the teacher's lounge. And I thought, I'm going to be a comedian at 9. 12th grade, did the talent show in high school. Nobody had ever done stand-up. And I won. Of course, I beat the accordion player and the folk dancers. Not a real big victory, but still. And then I told my mother I'm going to L.A. to be a comedian. She goes, "No, son, you're going to college first. I don't care what you do when you get done. You can be a goat herder for all I care, but you're going to be a goat herder with a college degree." Oh, I went to UNC Chapel Hill, picked up a couple of college degrees, and in April 1st, 1984, April Fool's Day, 1984, first open mic. Halfway through my set, I heard a voice inside my head very clearly say, "You're home." At that moment, I
Cool.
decided I am going to do it for a living. 18 months later, I said to my girlfriend, now my wife of 38 years, "I'm going on the road to do stand-up comedy. You want to come along for the ride?" Figuring she'd go, "Oh, hell no." She goes, "Yeah." So we gave up the apartment and our jobs, jumped into my little tiny Dodge Colt, and we were on the road 2,369 nights in a row, nonstop, comedy club to comedy club, beer bar to beer bar, drunk idiots screaming, "Tell us some jokes we can dance to." That's a quote.
That's so awesome. What a cool story, and how you just like reaffirming this is exactly what you're supposed to do. That's so cool.
I feel very blessed in that I believe comedy was definitely what I was born. People ask you, "Were you born funny?" Yes, as a matter of fact, an amusing thing happened on the way down the birth canal. No, but I was born funny, and I believe that my comic ability, creativity, imagination are simply the flip side of my depression, thoughts of suicide. Same brain, same wiring. How could it be any different? I can teach you to write stand up and perform stand up. I cannot teach you to process the incoming information the way my neurodiverse brain process. I just think funny.
Yeah, but look at the gift of what it's brought you, and like how you've spoke about your experiences. Even as painful as they are, these experiences are such great teachers for us, and they really, if you open yourself up to it, it allows you to continue on your path, to serve your mission, and to do your dharma, whatever it is that you're doing. So talk to us a little bit about how you transitioned. Are you still doing comedy, of course, but like now you're on this mission? No, well, but kind of. I mean, like you're funny now. You've been
Oh yeah,
funny
no.
within the.
People ask me, "Would you? Are you playing comedy clubs?" And this answer will sound familiar to you. You play comedy clubs? Not unless it's part of a plea bargain. I still do it occasionally at a corporate event where I'm speaking on suicide prevention. They don't have any entertainment for the banquet. I go, "I'll do 45 minutes of good, clean corporate comedy." So I still do comedy on occasion. I still work the cruise boats. I've worked the stand up on cruise boats since 2009. I've been to all continents, including all 7 continents, including Antarctica twice. So I still do stand up on occasion, if pressed into it. By the way, if you want to see my stand up, I think the best thing I ever did was in April 22. YouTube has a clean comedy series called Dry Bar Comedy. Dry bar meaning no alcohol. Dry Bar Comedy. If you type into YouTube, Dry Bar Comedy, Frank King, you'll find my 25-minute special.
Okay, cool. I will definitely check it out. Um, but what I like though that you're bringing is this with talking about suicide and all that's wrapped up into that. You're bringing who you are into it, which is comedy, which I think is important to do because it can feel like a very heavy topic or, like we said, very taboo. People don't want to talk about it, but it's like you got to bring the light into it somehow and to like keep moving towards this destigmatization of the topic itself. So I like that you're doing that actually through comedy. So well
Yes,
done.
and there's a comedy class, Stand Up for Mental Health. It's the brainchild of a guy named David Grenier in British Columbia in Vancouver, BC. And what it is comedy classes for people who have a mental illness. You have to have a mental illness to get in the class. You have to have a mental illness to teach the class. So it's part comedy class, part peer counseling because there are no normal people in the class. People with mental illness feel very comfortable, sharing. And I taught the class a couple times, and I got to tell you, those students were the best comedy writers as students I've ever encountered. The stuff that came out of their mouth, unedited, was ready for prime time. I'll give you an example. As a young woman, I always open the class by saying, so what do you got for me, Tish? What do you got for me? Trisha, what do you got? She goes, well, my boyfriend said he wanted to break up with me. I said, okay, what'd you say? I asked him why. He said, because I want to see other people. What'd you say, Trisha? I'm bipolar. Give me a minute. That's the way it came out of our mouth. Unedited, ready for TV. There's a woman named Lisa Ann who was double diagnosed depression and alcoholism. She was in treatment and also in AA. She just come from an AA meeting. And apparently somebody at the AA meeting mentioned Columbus. And she got to thinking about Columbus. So I said, what you got for me, Lisa Ann? She goes, I think Columbus was an alcoholic. Really? What leads you to? Well, let's think about this. His big idea was to sail west to get east. Doesn't that sound like something you come up with in a bar, like an alcoholic? And like an alcoholic, he did it. And like an alcoholic, when he got to where he's going, he had no idea where he was. And when he got back, like an alcoholic, he had no idea where he'd been. And this is my favorite part. And he got a woman to finance it twice. My God. And that's the way it came out. It just came out of her that way. They were I don't know if it's because they spend so much time in self-reflection, And imagine, public speaking terrifies most people. But public speaking about your mental illness, and the whole point of the show, because they have a graduation show, invite friends and family, is to help destigmatize, change people's concept of what mental illness looks and sounds like. You got these people up on stage, obviously high functioning, high performing, and poking fun at their mental illness. It was a brilliant idea.
Yeah, and that's one of the beautiful things I love about comedy in general is that it opens the door to people being able to do that. Like comedians are one of the few people that can go up there and make fun of anybody and like it's okay, really. And it's just important to do that. I think it's just I don't know. I love that about comedy. I think it's just so special in that way and so powerful in that way.
Well, here's the rule. You can make fun of anybody in comedy. You can make fun of any group to which you belong. So being suicidal, I can poke fun at that. Mental illness, yep. Lost people to suicide, yep. Because if I was neurotypical and didn't have any of those experiences, it would be completely off limits. But because I've got my mental illness membership card, I get this, and it makes the suicide prevention part of it more digestible and less threatening and more memorable. They call it comic relief for a reason.
Yeah, it's important. I want to circle back to what you said at the beginning around how anybody can make a difference and anyone can stop a suicide. And if you can elaborate for people a little bit on that and some tips that you give people because in my practice I run into it a lot of people for sure don't want to talk about it or they're afraid of what's going to happen if they do.
Hmm.
But then also the people around them don't know how to talk about it either. And so can you give us some like tips and tricks or what you suggest of like how do you have this conversation with people?
Well, important thing, I think, first, I teach them what depression looks like. Because people ask me, how do I know if somebody's depressed? Well, this is not an exhaustive list, but my top three or four, they have trouble, they eat too much or they can't eat. They sleep too much or they can't sleep. They have trouble getting out of bed in the morning, so they're often late for work or school. But then in the afternoon, they often rally like a whole different person. Here's one you can observe visually. They let their personal hygiene go. As long as you've known them, they've always been pretty well put together. In the last couple of weeks, clothes kind of dirty, hair's not quite so clean. It may be because they're having trouble getting out of bed in the morning simply to run a little wash and take a shower. Then the question comes up, what do you say to somebody who's depressed? I tell the audience, let's start with what you don't say. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Turn that frown upside down. My personal favorite, have you tried fish oil? At which
Yeah.
point I go from suicidal to homicidal. What you do say is, look, I'm here for you and I mean it. I know you're not lazy or crazy or self absorbed. I know that depression is a mental illness. Here's the good news with time and treatment, things will get better. I'll take the time, I'll help you get the treatment. And then you got to ask them the question. And it's tough. Are you having thoughts of suicide? Just like that. And I tell the audience, if you can't ask that, find somebody who can. And if you can't find somebody, not the cat, if you can't find somebody, then call me and I'll ask them. There's an old urban legend. You should never mention the word suicide in front of somebody who's depressed because it might make them more likely to do it. And the reverse is true. If you mention it, they're less likely to do it. So let's say they don't admit they're suicidal, but your gut tells you they are. How would you know? Well, they talk about death and dying a lot. You catch them Googling death, dying, or how to die by suicide. They're getting their affairs in order, especially if they're giving away prized possession because they want to make sure the possessions go to the people they want them to go to when they're gone. They're gathering the means, buying a firearm or stockpiling medication. And here's one that's counterintuitive and very dangerous, I think. They've been depressed for a long time, and now they're happy for no apparent reason. And you're happy because they're happy. They may be happy because they've chosen time, place, and method, and they know the pain is coming to an end. That's something most of my neurotypical friends don't generally understand. They say, why would he want to kill himself? Well, chances are he probably didn't. Most people don't. Most people just simply want to end the pain. But let's say they tell you they are having thoughts of suicide. What do you say? I tell them, you say, do you have a plan? And if they have a plan, what is the plan? And if it's detailed, time, place, and method, you need to get them on the phone with 988, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline or text line, at the very least. And if they won't pick up the phone, you pick up the phone, you call 988, and the volunteer will do what they can to talk the phone into the hand of the person who's struggling. Now, when do you call the cops? Because I get that question a lot. If they're an immediate threat to themselves or others, you've got no choice. I know this. They're going to get dragged in front of a judge if they're actively suicidal, and the judge is going to decide whether or not they spend 3 days in lockdown with no belt or shoestrings. And they're going to be pissed. They're going to unfriend you on Facebook. But at least they'll be around to unfriend you on Facebook. Now, one last item, and I've never seen this in the literature, never had anybody mention this in a class. What if they got a plan, but it's not that detailed? They got a plan, but it's kind of iffy. I would say, okay, tell me, you going to kill yourself? And if they say no, I would say, all right, tell me why not. Make them give voice to whatever's keeping them here because something is keeping them here. Otherwise, you wouldn't be having this conversation. So that, you can make a difference. You can save a life, and you can do it by doing something as simple as having a conversation if you know how. And, well, now you know how.
Yeah, that was so good. So many good takeaways, and I like the part about just having the conversation in general because there's something about sitting across from somebody and asking them, "Are you going to kill yourself?" or do you have a plan to kill yourself? And that person having to really, like, reconcile and verbalize it one way or the other can be, like, from what I have seen is, like, that's the light bulb moment for them of like, "Whoa, I just this became very real, I just said it out loud and I said it to someone else." And that was, like, the lifeline that they needed, is just saying it. And I think that that cannot be undervalued of how important it is, um, for both people.
Yes, and if you have that conversation, and you get them to agree to seek help in some way, follow up in a day or so. Let them know you care. Reach out and go, "Hey, man, I know you're in a bad place the other day. How you feeling now?" Just knowing somebody cares, that gives a damn, can be very helpful.
Mhm. Yeah, and the other thing you spoke to is like a the purpose in it is giving somebody reconciling with their purpose in life and like finding a reason to keep going. Even when everything feels incredibly dark or incredibly painful is like one little reason can be all that someone needs to just push through till they can get on the other side of what they're dealing with or find the resources and the help for sure. It's so important. So tell us a little bit about on that note, like what was your reconciliation? What was your reason as to why you chose differently?
Chose not to pull the trigger? Yeah. Well, I'd like to say it was very romantic, but it wasn't. It was very practical. We lost everything. I had $1 million life insurance policy. So in suicidality, one of the three legs of a three-legged stool is burdensomeness. You're a burden. The world would be better off without you. And I knew my wife would be better off financially. I was worth a lot more dead than alive. So I was going to kill myself so she could get the $1 million and restore herself financially. She'd be brokenhearted, but she'd no longer be broke. But having sold insurance right out of college, I knew every life insurance policy has a 2-year suicide clause. If you kill yourself in less than 24 months, it just gives you your premiums back. If you wait till 24 months and a day, they pay the $1 million. So I called my insurance agent. I say, "Hey, Graham, how long have we had that policy?" And he said, "I don't know. Let me look." And I can hear him clacking on the keys on the computer. And he comes back on and he goes, 22 months. And then it hit him and he goes, "And don't do it." Because he'd had that conversation with a lot of people who the policy was fully in force and he delivered checks to the beneficiaries. So that's why I had to wait 60 days to kill myself.
Well, I didn't even know that part of it. That's brand new information to me, and I never even thought about that on the insurance side and that guy too, how like man, he knows.
Yeah, he knew exactly what I was asking. I wasn't asking how long I had a policy. I was asking for permission to kill myself. And he was
Yes.
kind enough to step up and go, "No, no, no, don't do it."
And so then it sounds like just that aspect of like you have to wait. Like I have another day tomorrow, like keep going. It wasn't time.
Yes, and, I had 60 days, and I don't remember when the 60th day passed. I wasn't marking them off the calendar. I think things must have gotten a little better. The bankruptcy went through, the phone calls stopped, and there's a protocol now that it's, stop, drop, and roll is what it's called. You can Google it. Suicide prevention, stop, drop, and roll. And the stop is you decide you're not gonna make any serious decision in the next 24 hours. And, of course, ending your life would be a pretty serious decision. So the stop part of it is, "Okay, stop. Let's not make any serious decisions for 24 hours." Oftentimes, that's enough, get that kind of distance from those thoughts. Because oftentimes, when somebody has a thought of suicide, I think on average, they have a serious thought of suicide, on average, it happens within 10 minutes. So if you can postpone that for a day, for 24 hours, then that's the first part of stop, drop, and roll.
Okay. So what do you say to the whole aspect of people feeling hopeless?
Yeah, that's how it feels to me. That's how depression feels to me. Hopeless, why bother? I think when people say I'm depressed or whatever, I said, well, look, my advice is get a physical, because sometimes physical ailments present as mental health issues. There's a guy here in Eugene, Oregon, I know, who was terribly depressed, And he went in, he had a physical, and he had blood work, and turns out his body was not metabolizing iron properly. So they put him on a time-release iron tablet, and all of a sudden the depression disappeared. So get a physical first, and then go to a clinician, mental health clinician, and just get an evaluation. Is it garden variety depression? Is it the depressive state of bipolar disorder? And if they recommend medication, a lot of people are scared of medication. It's not a life sentence. You don't have to take the rest of your life. I've had relatives of mine who only took it long enough to get over the hump and then, tapered off. And if they recommend medication, take it. However, if it doesn't work or doesn't work well, there's a new DNA, not new, it's been around about 10 years, DNA cheek swab test like Ancestry.com. They take your DNA and they try to match it to the psych medication that aligns most closely with your metabolism. So it narrows the list of possibilities down to 2 or 3 from who knows how many. And that helps to eliminate the lab rat, go on, doesn't work, taper off, go on, doesn't work, taper off. So if mine hadn't worked right off the bat, I would have done the cheek swab and tried to figure out which ones have the best chance of working.
Yeah, and what I hear you speaking to is this like don't give up mentality. Like keep trying because I talk about that a lot with people too is not every form of therapy works for everybody either, but there are so many different avenues and so many different resources now of ways that will work and can work, and you just need to find your method. You need to find who works for you, what works for you, but the biggest thing, even with the medication, like you're saying, and what I'm hearing is just don't give up. Just keep trying. Keep trying something.
Yeah, try to figure out what it is that works best with your metabolism, and because it's a painful process to go on, doesn't work, taper off, go on, doesn't work, taper off. It's a long and arduous path.
Yeah, same with therapy too. I mean, it's you try it a couple sessions, you don't like it, don't vibe with it, try something, but just try. Like, what's it gonna hurt? Just try. Like,
Yeah, and you know, you just said it. Also, not everyone works for everyone in terms of therapy. You need somebody who's copacetic, someone who gets you. Now that said, I was doing Wofford College, and after my presentation, a young woman came up afterwards, and she said, "Can I give you a hug?" Bear in mind, I'm in my mid 60s. She's 20. We're right in the middle of the Me Too movement. Everybody in the room has a video camera on their phone. I could just see the headline in the paper next day, speaker gropes co-ed. So I pushed my pelvis back as far as I possibly could and gave her the most brotherly hug I could. And I said, "Are you a hugger?" And she said, "No." I said, "Well, what was that?" She said, "Well, I've been struggling with my mental health for a number of years. I've got a therapist, and she's well educated. She's got the diplomas on the wall. She knows what she's talking about. However, she doesn't have any context. She doesn't have a mental illness." And she goes, "I'm at the back of the room listening to your little keynote. 15 minutes in, I'm thinking to myself, this guy is inside my freaking head." She said, "You did more for me in 45 minutes than she's done for me in 2 years because I have the context." No slight to the woman with the great education, but I had a psychologist come up to me one time after my presentation. And he said, "Frank, what qualifies you to speak on suicide prevention? You're not a psychologist or psychiatrist or therapist of any kind." I said, "Well, I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like." And in the silence that followed, I said, "Look, I could go to college. I could learn absolutely everything you know. You will never know everything I know. That's what qualifies me to talk."
hmm Yeah, and I think speaking from the therapist side, I've often wondered about this, but I think a lot of therapists aren't willing to go there either. They're afraid that if people or your clients know that you're struggling with something, it makes you feel less credible or kind of that imposter syndrome showing up. But what I've really tried to grasp onto is just being authentic as to who I am and allow it. Like when I'm going through struggles and the darkness, like just allow, not trying to put on this mask that I'm not, and just allowing myself to be real with the people I work with because that authenticity is going to speak so much more than a bunch of diplomas on the wall,
Yeah.
really.
Well, and I understand you don't want to overshare. You want to share when appropriate. There's an old joke in the, I guess, in the therapist business. Um, you don't go to a massage therapist and when they finish, say to the massage therapist, "Now let me do you." Um, if your experience, life experience, lived experience is similar to theirs, or will serve a purpose by revealing that you have these struggles as well, then great. But I mean, nobody wants to overshare, but there's a benefit to sharing.
Mhm. Yeah. So we talked a little bit before we were recording about how you have some really good takes on first responders and suicide. And especially when we talked about the men's, because it is a highly male dominated field, is talk to us a little bit about what you know or what you've seen, what you've come across with how does first responders and the suicide um, go together, and what are you noticing out of that group?
Well, it is, as you said, male dominated. And in the United States, on average, 8 out of 10 suicides in the US every year are men. And, people go into construction, kind of rough and tough guys generally. I'm sure people go in law enforcement, same sort of, big boys don't cry kind of a philosophy. More, as we mentioned, more first responders die by suicide every year than in the line of duty. And whether it's law enforcement or firefighters or EMTs or whatever. And I mentioned to you that I'm a co-author on 4 books on men's mental health. The books are called Guts, Grit, and the Grind. Guts, Grit, and the Grind. And if you'd like, um, I can email you a link to the first book. I narrate, so it's a full length audio book narration of book 1, and anybody's welcome to. It's up on YouTube with an image, and so you can listen to the whole book start to finish. But the genesis of that was one of my co-authors, Sarah Gare, teaches first responders suicide prevention, a program called QPR, and she wanted to buy a book on men's mental health for one of the fellows. And she went to Barnes and Noble brick and mortar, couldn't find anything. So she got on Amazon online, nothing. She thought, well, there's a vacuum. So what it is, they're all anthologies. The idea was we're going to do one book. We're going to see if we can't find 12 guys, just 12, who are willing to be honest about their struggles, whether it's substance abuse disorder, divorce, bankruptcy, mental illness, whatever. We thought we'd be lucky because guys generally aren't forthcoming. Things like this. We'd be lucky if we got a dozen guys. We ended up with 60 men. It became
Cool.
4 books. Yeah. And each story begins with like 500 words, life is good. The next 500 words, life's bad. And the final 500 words, here's how I'm coping. And the philosophy behind that is that men tend to take advice from men. So if a man goes to the book and he sees his problem and he turns to that guy's story and sees how that guy is coping, maybe he would adopt those coping mechanisms for himself. So that was the premise behind the book. And so and we ended up with, and the 2 women who put the book together or had the idea, they called me. They said, Frank, listen, we're doing this book on men's mental health. Would you make it funny? And I said, wait a minute. You 2 ladies are doing a book on men's mental health? Don't you think you might need a co-author who is, I don't know, a guy? A guy. I said, look, let me be a co-author. Let me voice the books for Audible. I just finished doing book 4 for Audible, and I'll make it funny. And it looks like an automobile owner's manual. We figured if we made it look like an automobile owner's manual, guys might actually pick it up. And it has a lot of brain slash engine metaphors. For example, don't you wish that men had a check engine light on their brain? So when the light goes on, they go to the mental mechanic. The mental mechanic puts them up on the rack and goes, Bob, of course you're depressed. Look at this. You're 2 quarts low on serotonin. So it's funny, but it's a manual. It's got all kinds of exercises and suggestions along with the stories. So it was apparently one of a kind. Nobody else was doing it at the time.
Well, that's so awesome. I'm gonna check it out for sure, and we'll put the link in the show notes so people can check it out. But I use that metaphor a lot actually, the check engine light, and how we don't treat our mental health the same way we literally treat our car maintenance. And we just ignore the lights and the warning signs and stuff that's coming up, but we just keep driving. And then we get really unclear or upset when the engine blows up, but it's like the lights have been on for a long time. You've just been ignoring them.
Yes, and, when you buy a new car or buy a car, oftentimes you'll sign up for AAA because the car's working well now, but at some point, you're going to get a flat tire, the engine's going to blow up, you're going to lock your keys in your car, you're going to need AAA. And oftentimes you'll put a first aid kit or something in the trunk because you never know when you're going to, so you prepare ahead, and that's what we're suggesting is you need a pit crew. People who drive for NASCAR, they don't wait till they roll in the pit to hire a pit crew. They got those guys standing there with the gas, the tires, and the oil ready when they roll in the pit. So you need to, I believe, tell anybody you know, love, and trust what you're struggling with so they can be your pit crew. They'll know what to do when the time comes.
Yeah, and do you use therapy now as kind of a maintenance program for yourself? Like it's just kind of a way of life that you've adapted?
Honestly, I've never been to therapy.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah, I didn't know what I had. I knew how I felt. I didn't know what I had. My co-authors, one's a psychologist, the other's a therapist. We're chatting one day, and I'm describing my symptoms, and they said, "Frank, you have major depressive disorder and chronic suicidal ideation." I do? Yes, you do. So that's the first I knew how I felt, but I didn't know I had a name. Now, my fourth TEDx talk is called "Suicide: The Secret of My Success." Dead man talking. And I didn't have to audition for that one. They liked the title and subtitle so much. What happened was, it was January of '84. I had married my high school sweetheart, a very down-to-earth, middle-class, picket fence, 2 kids, dog, that kind of person. Wonderful woman, but I was miserable. We didn't belong together. And I was selling insurance because that's what she wanted me to do. That was her vision for me. I was working for her dad's insurance company. And I was not going to open mic night, which, as you know, that's where I felt I belonged since I was 9 years old. So in January of '84, I'm driving down Highway 163 in San Diego about 5 in the afternoon. I had the thought, first time ever, why don't you just kill yourself? And my second thought was very empowering. I thought, wait a minute, I could divorce my wife, quit my job, try comedy. If it works, great. If it doesn't, hell, I can always kill myself. That's how I got into comedy. And, there are few things more powerful in this world than somebody with absolutely nothing to lose. Because if I'd stayed put, I'd be dead. So that's how I got into comedy.
How cool. It's such a cool story, and your mission of how you're using all this you're impacting so many people and engaging in the conversation. Like that's what I just love about these kind of platforms is if one person hears it and one person resonates, then it was totally worth it. Like our conversation, your talks, everything was totally worth it if one person makes that other decision.
Yes, and I coach speakers. And one of my speakers and I were at the same conference. And she was disappointed because they had set the room for 100 and only 25 people showed up for her breakout. And I said, yes, Colleen, but suppose one of those people really needed to hear what you had to say.
Mm-hmm.
Not always the number of people.
No, it's not. It's just about the one, really. Yeah. Oh, I love it. Well, I've had such a blast talking to you, and man, you're just such a light, and I love it. Like, keep on doing what you're doing and using your story, because I really, truly believe that's how we impact one another through our stories. And so just keep on doing what you're doing. It's awesome, but...
Got no choice.
Right? Dead man talking.
Yeah.
It's so awesome.
I feel like George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life, in that, the people come up after my speech, and they're crying, or they tell me, I feel like I've seen what their lives might be like if I weren't there simply to tell my story and listen to theirs. And if I killed myself, I would, in theory, take a lot of those people with me that never had a chance to hear me speak or share their story. So I'm afraid I'm stuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the work continues, my friend.
Yes.
Well, tell us how people can get connected with you, or how make sure we got a link to your stuff and check out your comedy of 2022. But
I'll send you the link to the Dry Bar comedy special and the link to the book, the audiobook. And my website is simply mentalhealthcomedian.com, mentalhealthcomedian.com.
Nice. Very good. Well, yeah. Well, anytime, you're always welcome back on the show, and I know people are going to get so much value out of this, and the one person that needs to hear it is going to hear it. So we did our work today.
Yes, would you like me to close it out as a comedian will close it out?
Yes, do it, please.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe, and tell your friends. If you did not enjoy this podcast, well, we hope you have no friends.
Done. Mic drop. I couldn't have said it better.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Frank, thank you again so much, and just really honored to sit and have this conversation with you today.